What did Harold Bloom think of Gravity's Rainbow? Because Bloom is known as a traditionalist, an advocate for the Western canon. And so, did he really get into the American postmodern classic? Did he really enter the zone? And today we are going to hear Bloom speak at length on Gravity's Rainbow. And I'm going to be here as a tour guide to help explicate some of the more esoteric points Bloom makes about the Kabbalah and about Gnosticism and a couple other things. And Right Conscious is the home of everything related to Thomas Pynchon here on YouTube. And so if you are a Thomas Pynchon fan, go check the playlist down below if you want some more videos on him. And without any further introductions, let us now hear from Bloom. For Pynchon, ours is the age of plastics and paranoia, dominated by the system. No one is going to dispute such a conviction. Reading the New York Times first thing every morning is sufficient to convince one that not even Pynchon's imagination can match journalistic irreality. What is more startling about Pynchon is that he has found ways of representing the impulse to defy the system, even though both impulse and its representations are always defeated. In the zone, which is our cosmos as the Gnostics saw it, the Kenoma, or great emptiness, the force of the system, of they whom the Gnostics called archons, is in some sense irresistible, as all overdetermination must be irresistible. So in Gravity's Rainbow, many of the characters, including we could call the main protagonist Slothrop, try to escape the system. Or one could say they try to rebel against oppressive systems, whether those are metaphysical, corporate, militaristic, bureaucratic, whatever. But a main theme in Pynchon's work is that this is in general futile because these systems are so vast and connected to so many different institutions and centers of power and money that you'll never really be able to find the center or be able to escape them in their entirety. And this connects back to Gnosticism, which is a heretic offshoot of Christianity, which believes that we are not being ruled by a benevolent God, but by a pantheon of archons who in general, at least some of them, are preventing us from actually seeing reality for what it is, which is an illusion and attaining gnosis. And so our world in Gnosticism is called Kenoma, which is basically a wasteland, a fake world created by the demiurge, kind of the ruler of these malignant archons, to trap souls, to get us into material existence and think that that's all there is. And when we look at the zone in Gravity's Rainbow, it is comprised of a landscape that has been destroyed by war and the black market, and secret technologies and weird intelligence groups are functioning there, which is all just deception. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen Westworld, the HBO Western sci-fi show, but it feels, I won't spoil anything, but it feels very similar to that there is a group of individuals stuck in this fake world who can't get out. And so that last little bit, from what I can see from a Pynchonian framework, means that when a character thinks they are out of the system and have liberated themselves, when Slothrop thinks that he's out, he's thus thrown into a larger system that has already been accounted for, that has already been set up for them to fail in or to fall into sex, drugs, or whatever in again. And so returning to the force, yet there is a counterforce, hardly distinguished in its efficacy, but it never does or can give up. Unfortunately, its hero is the extraordinarily ordinary Tyron or Tyrone Slothrop. I'm a teacher, you guys. I have there. Is it Tyron? No, it's Tyrone. Is it Tyrone? No, it's Tyron. Who is a perpetual disaster and whose ultimate fate, being scattered, rather in biblical sense, is accomplished by Pynchon with dismaying literalness. And yet Slothrop, who has not inspired much affection even in Pynchon's best critics, remains more hero than anti-hero, despite the critics and despite Pynchon himself. There are more than 400 named characters in Gravity's Rainbow, and perhaps 20 of these have something we might want to call personality, but only Tyrone Slothrop, however negatively, could be judged as self-representation, however involuntary, on the author's part. Slothrop is a Kabbalistic version of Pynchon himself, rather in the way that Scythrop, the poet in Thomas Love's Peacock's Nightmare Abbey, is intentionally a loving satire upon Peacock's friend the poet Shelley, but Kabbalistically is a representation of Peacock himself. I'm not interested in adding Nightmare Abbey to the maddening catalog of sources for Gravity's Rainbow, though Slothrop's very name probably alludes to Scythrop's, with the image of a giant sloth replacing the acuity of the Shellian scythe. What does concern me is the Kabbalistic winding path that is Pynchon's authentic and Gnostic image for the route through the Kelpot or evil husk that the light must take it, if it is to survive in the ultimate breaking of the vessels, the Holocaust brought about by the system at its most evil, yet hardly at its most prevalent. So there is a lot to discuss here. And so Bloom is saying that the counterforce in Gravity's Rainbow mirrors the Gnostic struggle, the never-ending struggle to liberate ourselves from matter into gnosis. And so what I find really interesting in Bloom's analysis is he's talking about Slothrop, because many times when people think about Slothrop, and I would say a lot of the OGs who are listening to this right now or who are online feel differently, but he has been kind of depicted before as kind of just this bumbling, incoherent man who really isn't a hero, but is just kind of moving through this novel with no genuine quest for understanding. But in actuality, he is a failure, despite what is actually going on. And the big kind of theme in Slothrop's journey, and I wish I could say, hey, don't watch this, there's spoilers, because there's not really any spoilers in Gravity's Rainbow. But throughout the novel, Slothrop is slowly becoming fragmented, and then at the end, we finally get kind of the final scattering of him, where he kind of ceases to be a hero or a temporal character. And in a classical literature sense, this could be akin to the Tower of Babel or Diaspora, or, excuse me, I was like, wait, Diaspora, which is something that's imposed by a system. And so in the Kabbalah, and if you guys don't know what the Kabbalah is, and I'll have to do full videos on Kabbalah and Gravity's Rainbow, but it's a system of Jewish mysticism, which basically explains how energy comes from the ether, that's purest form, down to us down here at Mount Tooth on the bottom. And so this is basically, these little circles are called Sephiroths, and there is a path down to us and our earthly existence down at the bottom. And, it's an interesting point and something to think about very deeply. How does energy come from its spiritual energy, come from its highest form down to us, if you believe that? Because many people have no explanation for their system of spirituality and kind of the hierarchy of energy. And what's really cool about Kabbalah is that it connects to the other three Western arts of divination, which are numerology, tarot, and astrology. And you don't have to believe in these in terms of, oh my God, you're a Cancer, that means you're a wuss or whatever, or in the sense that, hey, I pulled this tarot card and that means I'm going to be really rich. But rather that those four arts of divination were ancient teachings that during times of oppression, like during the Dark Ages in Christianity, retained ancient wisdom, ancient understandings of archetypes and many other things. And that's why they were so popular with Renaissanceian occultists and so many others in the late 19th century and the early 20th century in kind of the modernist occult revival. And so Pynchon, who was reading all these individuals, whose generation before him were the ones discovering and reviving the Kabbalah, was very interested in the system. And because we are all atheists now, and we're so polarized, I'm an atheist, no, I'm a Christian, or I'm just a New Ager, I'm agnostic, and because the occult is literally occulted, it's hidden from the eye, most people do not take this stuff very seriously in terms of understanding even the influence it's had on countless thinkers in the past. And that is just good knowledge to have if you want to be able to be, one could say, a well-read or intellectual individual. And so in some theories of Kabbalah, it states that at some point there was the divine light couldn't be contained anymore, and it was eventually broken out, and fragments of that fell down to earth, to the material world down here at Mount Tooth, and it left behind Kelepots, which are the husks of impurity that Bloom is talking about here. And so Bloom is also saying that Slothrop represents, and now we're getting into the mind of the author supposedly, that Slothrop is a projection of Pynchon's anxieties and paranoias about the world and about his futile resistance and many of these other things, because he evokes Thomas Peacock using and turning Shelley, who was kind of a political idealist, into a character to make fun of or to poke satirical fun at. But when he does that, we're actually learning more about Peacock than we are about Shelley, because we're seeing his biases also come out. So Slothrop's journey is one of a Kabbalistic descent where the world, the system, the zone, the bureaucracy, the corporations have created an artificial Holocaust at an industrial scale, which not only has ruined the physical environment, but has scattered meaning, truth, and identity. And as we've seen, that's like kind of the project of the entire 20th century and all the neuroses that happened within it. And so Slothrop is trying to recover light and gnosis in this world. And it's funny that, Pynchon is evoking the Kabbalah and Rilke and others, in this, who was actually interested in the Kabbalah, in this sense to show us that he's this hero, he's this righteous character. He is someone who is trying to liberate these divine sparks. But then when you think of Slothrop and his sexual addictions and really all of his problems and lack of personality and vigor outside of the bedroom and his initial programming, you're like, wait, we've been giving this bizarre character, this, weird person to be our liberator. But then it's funny because then when you look at our heroes, whoever they are, I mean, I shouldn't say our heroes, but when you look at people like a Kanye West or whoever who had some talent, had, in Kanye's case, musical talent. And then, he's gone on this weird journey of trying to liberate people. And it's just like so bizarre. And it's like very similar to this, like that, if you want to do this, it's just going to be an absolute mess. And so returning to the quote, the not unimpressive polemic of Norman Mailer that fascism always lurks where plastic dominates is in Pynchon not a polemic, but a total vision. Mailer, for all his legitimate status as representative man, lacks invention except in ancient evenings, and there he cannot discipline his inventiveness. Pynchon surpasses every American writer since Faulkner at invention, which Dr. Samuel Johnson, greatest of Western literary critics, rightly considered to be the essence of poetry or fiction. What can be judged Pynchon's greatest talent is his vast control, a preternatural ability to order so immense an exuberance at invention. Pynchon's supreme aesthetic quality is what Hazlitt called gusto, or what Blake intended in his infernal proverb, exuberance is beauty. Sadly, that is precisely what the counterforce lacks, gusto. Slothrop never gives up, always defeated. He goes on, bloody and bowed, but has yet to yield to entropy, to dread scattering. Yet he lacks all exuberance. He is the American as conditioned reflex, colorless and hapless. Nothing holds or could hold gravity's rainbow together except Slothrop. When he was finally scattered, the book stops, and the apocalyptic rocket blasts off. Still, Slothrop is more than a Derridian dissemination, if only because he does enable Pynchon to gather together 760 pages. Nor is Gravity's Rainbow what is now called a text. It is a novel with a beginning, an end, and a monstrous conglomerate of middles. This could not be if the Shmuel Slothrop were wholly antipathetic. Instead, he does enlist something crucial in the elitist reader, something that is scattered when the hero, poor plastic man or rocket man, is apologetically scattered. Pynchon, as Richard Poirier has seen and said, is a weird blend of esoteric and insanely learned with popular or the supposed popular. Or to follow Pynchon's own lead, he is a Kabbalistic writer, esoteric not only in his theosophical elusiveness like Yeats, but actually in his deeper patterns like Malcolm Lowry in Under the Volcano. A Kabbalistic novel is something beyond an oxymoron, not because Kabbalah does not tell stories, it does, but because its stories are all exegetical, however wild and methodical. That does give a useful clue for reading Pynchon, who always seems not so much to be telling his bewildering, labyrinthian story as writing wistful commentary upon it. It has a story already twice told, though it hasn't been and truly can't be told at all. And I absolutely love this, that Bloom evokes this idea that Pynchon is the master inventor. And when I look at Gravity's Rainbow, especially in relation to a lot of the postmodern classics of today, the inventiveness of it still stands out. And I love that he evoked Faulkner there, that, when you look at Faulkner and some of his framings, like in As I Lay Dying or The Sound and the Fury, are absolutely amazing, even though they are a little bit more muted in comparison to Pynchon. And like, Bloom says, what should we judge? What is the standard? People say all the time, like when I hear someone say is a good book or bad, or when we judge authors, like what do we actually judge them on? How do we weigh the scales or the metrics in our brain? And, Bloom says, sourcing from Johnson, that inventiveness should be one of those high categories, that if you can be inventive in the novel and still hold it together and not let it slip into a postmodern wasteland zone, then you are doing a really good job. And exuberance is a great thing. Exuberance, especially in the American sense. If you're thinking about this at the time, there was the radical 60s revolution going on, but that was a youth movement. The rest of the world, the rest of society was still in the old world at some level. And having someone with the exuberance and the genius of Pynchon and the natural IQ talent to be able to come out here and do something like Gravity's Rainbow really must have been shocking, really must have been like a revelatory moment for so many people to watch an artist be able to do this. And so I 100% recommend Gravity's Rainbow to each and every one of you. It is going to be hard. I'm unfortunately not doing my book club anymore because we finished Gravity's Rainbow. I was there to help you, and I'm probably not going to do it again for a while because I'm going to do more Pynchon novels. But I would find someone to read it with. I would find some sort of support, whether that's guides or an old reading group on Reddit. I don't know where to find something, but get some form of support unless you are like a god tier reader, like really good at reading, which some of you guys are, and start to explore it. And I think that you guys are going to be more than happy at the end of it. You may not get it the first time or get everything, but you are going to be shocked by some of the moments. Like some of the things that happen in the novel, to someone who I feel has been desensitized to the world and seen a bunch of crazy stuff online and in person, there were moments where I was just sitting there and I was like, oh my God. I was like looking at my wife and I was like, dude, this is so weird. I read it, a lot of it when I was I reread it a lot at my parents' house in Wyoming over the summer when I was staying there. And I would just be sitting outside looking out at this nice mountain and just be reading this wild sex scene or, some crazy thing and just like, what is happening? And so Harold Bloom gives his support. I give my support. If you want to buy Gravity's Rainbow and support the channel, I'll put an Amazon affiliate link down below if you are interested. If not, go to Thrift Books, find it wherever, get an online copy, doesn't matter, and let me know your thoughts when you finish.